I nearly timed that right. It's like missed it by a second, a millisecond.
Close, so close.
I will eventually get it. You know, if I was smart, I would edit the two pieces together or do some. But I'm just,
Automate it.
I'm not actually that capable of these things. So anyway, well, it is good to be back. Good to see you, Erin.
Yeah.
We were supposed to do this show a couple weeks ago, and then I ended up in the hospital. It was not fun for those of you who, yeah. So I was there for 5 days. I'm getting better, so I'm happy
It's
about it.
actually, dude, you missed me too much. That's what it was. And it was like, you don't work with me anymore. You don't have to deal with my shenanigans in a Slack, and your body just couldn't take it. That's what happened.
I was going through withdrawal. It's Erin withdrawal. And that's what happened. I was diagnosed with Erin withdrawal. It's like, not enough pickles. Anyway.
Oh, we'll send you some more to keep you shelf stable a little bit longer.
So thanks for those of you who are joining us. If this is your first time, this is a show about developer relations and developer relations adjacent types of roles. So that's the ish in DevRelish is kind of, there's a lot of, DevRel years ago was like, oh, you were like a developer evangelist or developer advocate. And now it's like, there's all kinds of community and other types of roles that are adjacent to that. So that's the ish, but we also like to, do our plan where it's about relish. So anyway, because we're silly like that. Anyway, so my name is Brian Rinaldi. I lead developer relations at a company called LocalStack. And beside me is...
Yeah, I'm Erin McHale Staples. I'm a developer experience engineer at LaunchDarkly.
So today I'm super excited to welcome Dana Oshiro. She is with Heavybit. So Heavybit's kind of, I think, Dana, you and I met actually before I ended up working for any company in the Heavybit portfolio. Just kind of coincidentally, you reached out at some point during COVID and we just chatted and got to know each other. But, it's kind of just to kind of give people a sense of like how Heavybit, to me, every company I'm looking at cool developer tools startup or something, and I'm like, oh, who are the investors in this? And it's like, of course, there's Heavybit. They're there in all the good ones. So including LocalStack and LaunchDarkly, although that's not why we invited you.
I was gonna say, I think this is my third Heavybit startup that I'm at now. This is number 3.
All right.
Yeah.
It's just pushing you around different Heavybit startups. Yeah.
Yeah. We got a trend going here.
Yeah. Holy smokes. Yeah.
I'm catching up. I'm at 2 now, so I'll catch up to you soon. Hopefully not too soon.
Yeah. Let's not jinx it, okay? Brian is not
anyway. So Dana, why don't you we'll start off by like kind of telling us a little bit more about yourself and about like kind of your background and how your career led you to Heavybit.
Yeah, I am very much an accidental VC. And I'm frankly a little bit accidental to tech as well. I studied literature in university in Canada. And basically I wanted to be a writer and tell stories. And I figured the best way to be able to tell those stories was, working in marketing and I was a public speech writer for a while in government as well. And so like a lot of the work that I was doing was just telling stories in order to either influence how people behaved. So maybe it was to like get people to vote or to like not burn down a forest by throwing cigarettes into the forest kind of thing. Or it was, all the way to like looking at different types of technology and trying out different types of software. And I was a journalist along the way as well. So by the time I got to Heavybit, I had already worked for 2 developer kind of companies. So one being Heroku, which I think that clearly had like a DevRel, focus and a bottom up like dev first approach. And then the other one being Code for America, which was more like, that was actually a pretty hard call to action, which is effectively why don't you quit your high-paying tech job and spend a year working for very little pay to fix citizen services? And so that's kind of like the work that I was doing before getting to Heavybit. And I got to Heavybit because Heavybit was started by one of the Heroku co-founders. He kind of tapped me to come in and do some marketing work for Heavybit. And it was the first year that we had started, and the product was not really fully formed. And it was an accelerator. And so instead of marketing the accelerator, I just said, can I work on the product first before we try to shill it to people? And now it's 10 years later, and Heavybit as an accelerator has turned into a venture fund that has a very like community and dev focus. And we've always been about building a large community of, dev tool and infrastructure focused professionals who know how to build these types of companies. So hence you guys ending up in a bunch of these types of companies. And like, that's also kind of by design, because we track people who are good at their jobs and hope that they will end up in another portfolio company. So you've fallen for the trap a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, so you just, so we've been sucked in. We've been sucked in.
Yeah, we've been trapped.
I don't even know. There's an invisible hand guiding us.
Yeah. Like, they seem, yeah. So.
Well, and you and Erin share a background in journalism too, because I know
and it sounds like similar veins of journalism, very much in the political journalism realm.
Yeah, some of that, and then some moving to San Francisco is like a bit all encompassing. Like if you move to San Francisco, even if you didn't think you were going to be in tech, you kind of end up there somehow in some ways. I don't know. Like it's very hard to, especially when I moved here, it was like very hard to avoid, I think.
Yeah. I think that like,
and
I love the journalism and tech have that weird, or journalism and developers, I don't say tech, but journalism and developers have a very similar, you're a skeptic always. It's the, how does this work and why is this happening?
Yeah. And everything's getting reinvented kind of constantly in many ways. And so you have to be constantly learning and tracking the story. Otherwise you effectively lose the plot and you have no idea what's going on. So yeah.
We're also all three of us not like coming from I think Erin was journalism, I did history, and you said it was like literature. What was, I'm sorry.
I was literature. I was literature, and I was and then in Canada I was like I was like a print journalist, and that was more like focused on like arts and entertainment type of stuff. And then I went to nonprofits for a while, wrote for that, did some fundraising work that way. So, definitely a meandering path. I think the normal path to VC, or at least it has been, there's two normal paths to VC. One was you knew you wanted to be in VC, and you've got like a MBA, you go and do like an analyst position at, one of the major firms, and you kind of have more of a finance background. And then the other path is you, at least for dev tools, you start a dev tools or infrastructure company, it's wildly successful, you exit it, and then you enter venture as the one person, like the person that has the technical domain expertise, and you learn the finance side of it as you go. So those are usually the two paths. So kind of my way in has been, people don't necessarily know what to make of it, or they're a bit like, what kind of investor are you going to be? And I'll be like, well, do you need marketing or go-to-market help? Probably you do. That will be my role in helping you until you find the right people to hire and you can scale.
Yeah, and I mean, actually having, I worked for a lot of larger companies before, and and then only kind of more recently have been involved in startups, and I find like a lot of them, like that's actually what they need, because most of these, especially in the kind of developer tool space, I find it's like you have a ton of engineers. They have built out like a decent engineering team, and it's like, oh, we don't, where are your, like, who's doing marketing and who's doing like the go to market. It's like, well, we're kind of, that's being done somewhat by the founders in conjunction with
Yeah.
engineers who are kind of like deciding the product strategy, because like, oh, this seems cool, we should build it, let's add it to the product. Does it sell?
Mhm.
I don't know. We'll find out, right? Um, so
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
seen that a lot, and like, so I think having somebody like you probably is a real asset early on, because most of them don't have that kind of marketing, go to market expertise inside the company at the early stage.
Yeah, I mean, some of them actually are like are natural marketers, but they don't really know it, or at least they uh, definitely take it seriously enough that they make it a priority. Like I would
Yeah.
say Edith from Launch
Mhm.
Darkly was like very hardcore about, I mean, she was very worried about,
Mhm.
from a go-to market perspective, are we going to be able to build like build an acquisition funnel and all of this type of stuff. And so she went and said yes to every single talk she could ever do. And
Mm.
she really worked on her public speaking and her messaging around it. And
Yeah.
I was totally pushing her in the wrong direction. I was like, we were like, okay, is it going to be dark launches? Is it going to be release? Like, is it going to be feature flagging? Are we just going to be talking about general release management? And I was like, I don't know. I feel like these canary launches things might be a way to go. I was totally wrong. But
Mm.
I guess dark launches was also wrong because
Yeah.
people call it feature flagging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
True. But and I think her background was maybe, I don't know if it's common. You would know more because you're like, but like she was more of a product manager.
product. Yeah.
So like, so I think that's
Mhm.
kind of slightly different. I think than I see a lot of them. Like a lot of these are engineering led. Like the founders
Mhm.
are engineers who built the product. So like, yeah, I think depends on the company, um, but yeah, and one of the other things I love about Heavybit is your focus on community, because it's not
Mhm.
just like investing, but you all are out there like running events and being involved in the community in a way that at least my experience, like I haven't seen other VC firms doing as much of that. So I think that's one of the things that's been impressive to me in watching
Mhm.
everything the Heavybit does.
Yeah, and I think the
Awesome.
network is really interesting. Like I went to the Heavy Bit in New York meetup, and it was like I remember texting someone. I was like, "Oh, I'll see you there," and then it was like, "Oh, I know Andrew is going to be there," and then it was like, "Oh, I ran into 16 more people that I knew there already," and it was like
Yeah.
that's just the network that exists, and it's not like we've all been to a meetup and you're like, wow, this is really awkward, I don't really want to go to this, like, and it was like, no, this is a very friendly, inviting space that
Mhm.
we're all doers in the room, which I think is a very big testament to Heavybit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like that's the thing, right? When you're starting out in the early days with your community, there's this, first of all, like there's this fear, like, oh God, maybe nobody's actually going to show up, and this is going to be like a total bummer of an event or something like that.
Mhm.
But we also kind of knew we have to seed the room with people
Mhm.
who know what they're talking about, and we have to curate this in a good way, because we don't really want it to just be sort of like a vanity Twitter feed, but in real life type of thing. I don't know if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
like if it's just like a grab bag of humans that have no context or understanding of what they can talk about or how to interact with each other, you just create this weird, I don't know, environment. Whereas I think we've tried to curate, and we've tried to like also mentor our companies to be like very thoughtful about what their initial communities are going to look like. Um, but like I think I think like the point of when you're like this whole show is called Dev Relish. It's like what activities are in the Dev Relish universe. It's like actually for an early stage startup, there's an entire external facing go-to-market-ish thing. There's no real titles or job descriptions. Like they might advertise a job description or a title, but it's everything that is not currently being covered by somebody else on the engineering team or founding team.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple where like, honestly, like I was the first non-engineering hire. Like,
Yeah.
and so it was like, we don't have marketing, we don't have what DevRel was like a kind of a little bit of everything, trying to fill lots of the gaps that were like, how do we actually pitch this and get people to adopt it and start selling it, and market it, and so I mean, even doing at one point doing things that I was like, doing more of like marketing operations type stuff that I'm like,
Yeah.
I even told the at that company, I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I don't really, I mean, I know I can do the steps, but I don't know if I'm doing this right. Like I'm just gonna, but I'll fill the gap for now, because that's what's needed, right? So I think early in a lot of startups, DevRel fills, it's like it's kind of fills a lot of different pieces that are just in the kind of everything non-engineering kind of thing.
Yeah. And like even UI UX, right? Like it's
Yeah.
engineering, like the core product itself might be a super hardcore technical product. And then you're like, we actually don't have any front end engineering or design people. And this is like kind of hot garbage to get through the front door.
And it's so,
oh, that rings so true to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, based on like the stage of company too, because it's like that's one thing I've really noticed a lot is like I did the inverse of Brian, where I did mostly early stage, and then kind of now I'm at LaunchDarkly, which is a Series D, and it's the early stage. Like I remember when I was at Orbit, it was like your job is product community. But like we need you to pinch a product. By the way, also we need to help you. You're helping to build these early integrations, so like have fun. And it made it almost difficult because now it's like, it's almost now I find myself like at a later stage company. I'm like, how do you pull yourself back? Like it's a skill set I don't have. And it's the skill set I'm consciously working on like every day. It's like this, it's okay. Like you don't need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and kind of to follow on that, I think I was at one place, I won't name names, but like that it was kind of like similar kind of experience to what you described, where it's like they brought me on because they wanted to like reach front end developers and JavaScript developers and full stack people. But none of the people building the product had any background in that. They were like really hardcore back end engineers. And so like I got to using the product. It was like, oh my God, this is so painful to use. And they're like, well, why can't you just market it to these people? And I'm like, whoa, there's so much we have to do before we even get to that point. Because it's really, it's especially, I think front end developers and full stack developers especially have kind of gotten used to a kind of developer experience that's really pretty smooth, even on some products that are relatively new. I mean, the experience of using like some of these CLIs and stuff like that are really
Like the
nice.
V0, like
Yeah,
all the latest, like it's getting. I personally like still struggle in front end. Like if I had to choose, I'd be like, oh, we're gonna hang out in the back end and data all day. But like they make it so it's like some of the latest stuff as I've been digging in more and more in the front end, it's like, oh, this is nice. Why did I start on hard mode? Like, why did I start more of my developer stuff in Docker? Like, that was dumb. Why did I do that? Like,
was it a sign? Like, was that the coolest thing to start off on when you started there, or was it like user experiences? The expectations of user experience have gotten a lot like higher than they were back in the day, right? And so I guess when did you start, and like why go there, or what
I think I fell into engineering. It's like I'm mostly self-taught, but the only like engineering classes I took were actually in data science. And so I think for me, I came in through a data science Python background and then enjoyed, I was like, oh, here's how to put things into a database. Like, here's how to run like SQL database and MySQL. And like, so I started very much in that and had to teach myself the other aspects. It was like probably database and then APIs was probably the next big chunk of things that I learned. And so an interface was like the last stuff. I was like, oh, I remember really struggling how to like install a custom font the first time on a website. And that was like a website. And I'm like, ooh, this is scary and hard. And it was just, I think by the nature of how I had learned and the skills that I needed was very data centered skills, which you're not worried about so much in other aspects of the development world.
I mean, now you are.
Yeah, now it's like,
now
I'm like, hold on.
The cool thing.
I did the cool thing. I do think that like if I was exposed to it earlier on in my career, and like I do think I probably would have been a data scientist. Like I think just because that's probably the first thing that really clicked with me in the dev. And even now I'm like, oof, like I lean that way. It's more fun to work on that kind of stuff for me.
I do think the developer experience in data stuff is getting
getting better.
It's getting a lot better. I mean, that's, the company I was talking about, the part of the problem was they were all like API and data backend like experts. And so like they were used to they're like, well, this is normal, isn't it? And that's just how I'm like, that's not how front end developers work. No, not at all.
It's
and so, but I do feel like a lot of especially now with the AI, all these the data startups and stuff like that, the UX is really getting pretty slick. It's gotten a lot better.
It is. It's like, but it's like introducing people who, it's literally introducing people who speak completely different languages and have completely different workflows to each other to try to build like businesses together. And I find it so interesting because it's just like there is no standardized workflow across the board for these people. There is no standard handoff across applications, and like figuring out what level of abstraction to build around if you're going to build a framework or something like that is kind of interesting. And then just knowing that like it could change in like 3 months time. Like you could have basically built an entire like market wedge that is like just wiped out off the map, like like a quarter from now or something like that.
And it's for me
exciting.
It's really cool, but it's also very interesting. So like before I launched Darkly, I was in the ML ops space. And so machine learning ops, data, and I think about, I went to KC DevOps Days this year, and like someone was like, what the hell is ML ops? Like, this is like a made up thing. It's just like, and I'm like, whoa, wait, like coming from the data land, there is an entire subsection of people that are employed in this field that it's like, you just have never, it's a very different, like they're still doing ops, but like we're thinking about two very different problems in similar manners, but like having now been in both worlds, I'm like, y'all are talking about the same thing, just different processes, like different tools. Like your stack of tools is different, but it's the same problems you're dealing with. And it's so interesting.
Yeah. And I do think a lot of times we cross-talk each other in the tech industry because everybody thinks, I've been in this now 27 years, and I swear, like, a lot has changed, but also like a lot of the problems end up being very similar to like, I don't know, we were trying to solve this problem like 25 years ago. We were doing it differently, but like we were doing it, so like I always joke, for instance, and because I do a lot of front end stuff, so like I joke about now everybody's talking about SSR and server-side rendering as if it was like just invented last year, and I'm like, that's all we were doing when I started web development like 27 years ago. It was it wasn't exactly the same, but it was very similar.
I mean, it's like it is very similar in concept, but like there's the right time and the right place to introduce certain concepts, and so some things are just like much earlier or introduced too early for where like adoption might happen, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm looking at I'm looking at unikernel stuff right now. I'm looking at local first stuff right now. Like it's kind of these are all not new concepts, but there's usually like some compelling zeitgeisty type of event or something that maybe makes them a little bit more relevant today. Yeah, but you know, I have also been wrong, like very wrong about things too, right? So yeah.
I'm very wrong very often, so I I sympathize.
I'm never wrong.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, Erin's never wrong. I think that's but like Simon and I go way back, and like and he made this comment. It's always funny to see how this pendulum swings back and forth, and it's like the things definitely change, but some of the like, as an example, I got my start, and everything you did in web development was on the back end because the front end was really dumb. It was unable to do pretty much anything. So everything was in the back end. You did everything on the server, and the server was. And then, like at a certain point, we like started doing things. Simon and I were kind of in this world a little bit, like with like things like where we had things like Flash, and we said, oh, we can shove stuff to the front end and make these very rich front ends, and it's going to be faster because it's on the client, and and our servers were part of what was slowing us down because database servers were slow, and that's like, okay, but that didn't. Then that transitioned back to like oh, let's move everything back to the server because the Flash thing wasn't working, and and now we kind of keep going back and forth on the same thing. The technology changes and it gets better. I'm not saying like that we're kind of, but it's just it shifts in ways that over years you can kind of say like, okay, I see a pattern in this shift. It keeps kind of going back, like we're going to do now. We're back kind of transitioning where like we were doing all the stuff on the front end with like React and frameworks like that. Like, let's throw everything on the client. And now we're like, oh, well, maybe that's not really performing. So we need a server side rendering and React server components and start doing everything on the server again. And it's like, okay. Yeah, I see this again.
There's a really good book literally on that like effect. The polarity complex, polarity something. I'm like, it's in my bookshelf somewhere. Polarity management. There's the book. I'm like, it's literally sitting on here, and it talks about like how do you constantly balance these shifting pendulums, but it's also like how do people, like, what are the people reactions to that? Really interested in like the people impacts of it. I could not tell you much more than there's a book on this subject right now because it's been a while since I've read this, but do you recommend?
Simon is saying, will we ever find a nice equilibrium vacillating between all these extremes? No. Like,
darn, Simon, you're disappointed.
No. This is like, okay, a lot of the best work, the most interesting work that I get to do is like kind of, it's not necessarily working on like sort of the commercial launches with a lot of these companies, but working more on like the movement building type of stuff. And those pieces are like introducing pretty abstract, complex approaches to computing, right? And the reason why is because some major industry-wide thing or some major technology shift has happened, and so there's a need for new tooling or a new approach or workflow. But if you're super successful at introducing that workflow or a new approach, it gets co-opted by a bunch of other people, a whole bunch of other kind of garbage and bloat gets grafted onto it, and then a new group of people are like, we should simplify this, and there should be a new style, a way of thinking about this, and a new style of workflow. We should move to this, and you're like, like, what? But I thought we were all in on React and frameworks and Jamstack and all this kind of stuff, and now people are moving. Like, there's this. Everything once something that was like punky and new and cool becomes establishment, it then gets, I don't know, like there's a new rebellion that comes up
Yeah.
or whatever and transforms things.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I definitely have seen that as well. I've seen that as well. I mean, just because I think partly because naturally, as something becomes more mature, like more, you have to start selling it eventually, right? Like that's part of the point. We're going to make some money off these things, and like, and when you start trying to make money off, it's like, oh, well, now we need to meet the needs of these customers and these customers, and suddenly the simple thing that was like to solve this problem of like we want to, make the simple way to do X becomes complex because it's trying to meet the needs of a broad market that it can sell to, and like, and then somebody else comes in and says, you know what, we can take that, we can simplify it, so we're going to see that. Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that too. Sorry, Erin, I cut you off.
You're all good. I was gonna say I'm curious because it's like always, and this is like the VC world, I'll fully admit, like intimidates me. Like if I had to pick like one field, like I'm probably less intimidated of moving into a full engineer role than I am moving into a VC role. Because you have to be like a toad, not like as a developer advocate, you have to be like a little bit ahead of the curve, but like as a VC, you have to be a lot ahead of the curve. So like how do you approach that from that kind of perspective and validate like, are they really up to something, or is this kind of smoke and mirrors?
I mean, I don't think that. I mean, all a VC is somebody that has been given somebody else's money to gamble with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, um, whatever your domain expertise is under that allows you to be able to like qualify a deal. So you're like, this person seems like a great technologist. I think their background fits to the initial audience that they're going after, whatever. I think they have a sound approach or whatever, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It really is like, do I believe this story? And do I believe that this is the team that can execute against this story? But there's like so many variable risk factors that you can't control for. So I guess, and no one really knows if a VC is good until 10 years after the fund has been fully deployed and some exits have happened. And if no exits happened or no acquisitions happened, then they sucked at being a VC. Like, you know what I mean? But the time horizons to find out if you're good or if you suck are so blown out that like,
yeah, I guess perspective, like, yeah, that's a very, I guess I've never thought about it from that perspective of like that exit timeline, because it's a totally different timeline than like the day-to-day you think of, like the day-to-day, like, did you get users? Yes, no. Like, is this easy to use? Yes, no.
Well, I think especially given like, I mean, because Heavybit mostly focuses on like early stage. So like, you're getting in like right at the beginning, and these are, I mean, Launch Darkly had it's what 10 years now, right? So it's like it takes a long time to kind of reach that point, and there's a lot of factors even that like impact that could draw it out even longer, right? I mean, so it's I can see that. That's the thing that scares me about it. It's like even even from like an investing standpoint, because we have like Orlando doesn't have a big startup community, but we have some. It's been getting a little bit better. But like, so we have kind of like more like co-op type investors who invest in like seed round and startups here. And I've kind of toyed with getting involved, but I'm like, maybe it's because I'm older and I'm like, I'm turning 50 next week. It's like, okay, well, do I really want to wait 12 years to see if this investment pans out in any way whatsoever? It's like that's 10 to, it could be anywhere from like 8 to, whatever, 10, 12 years, like before I really even know if this investment will pay off, I mean, you may know ahead of time, but before you could really exit it and take your money out, right? It's a while.
Yeah, usually. I mean, I guess, I think, listen, I think I was like originally pretty intimidated by investment and in general, or VC in general, mostly because like the vintage of VCs that I was accustomed to, especially having been a journalist, were the ones who were like very like thought leadery. Like there were
Mm,
really boisterous, big personalities, famous bloggers, famous on the internet, all this kind of stuff, and that
mm,
isn't really what I guess makes you a good VC. Like it definitely drives pipeline. Like it gives you awareness so that people maybe want to pitch you and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean you're a great picker. It just might mean that you created enough noise and visibility for yourself that you have more to pick from.
mm,
But a lot, in some ways, like the job of like at least of a VC firm in general uh, is very similar to what some DevRel's job is. It's like find the correct audience for the type of product that will help make that startup successful. Uh, talk to enough of that audience, and then instead of them paying us money, we're putting investments into their companies. But that being said, we own a percentage of their companies, right? And so it is our responsibility now to make sure they are as successful as they possibly can. Otherwise, everybody loses. But it's not, I think I was intimidated because I am from Canada and we just don't have like a VC ecosystem. And frankly, I'm from like a kind of I'm from a small fishing town, and I didn't even know where money came from. Like really, like I don't know. So that's the bizarro universe of San showing up in San Francisco in 2004, 2005, and just being sucked into this world that is a fast fantasy world with like surprises where you're like, that's how that works. That's not very complex or smart. And other ways where you're like, wow, like you are building a whole new computing or operating system. Like that is crazy. Like, so yeah.
It's, I mean, like, that's even like encouraging for myself because I'm very much still in the like, whoa, very intimidating, very scary. Like, the VC world is complex and all over the world. And yeah.
I
yeah.
think everybody's like trying to anybody good is always like a little bit anybody good is always like learning every day, and anybody good recognizes that they're like not done learning, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that especially I think, I wouldn't say like DevRel's most jobs are like that, but like I think DevRel you have to really, I mean, part to me that a lot of the job is about learning. It's like you have to,
Yeah.
I mean, not just even when you start a new job, and obviously you're learning new stuff, but like the whole point is the tools evolving, the whatever talking about is evolving. You come up with new products. You're constantly having to like learn new things and also stay ahead of the curve a little bit to try. Because I mean, I think a big part of that job is also coming back to the company and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing everybody talking about. These things look really cool. I think we should just kind of, maybe place a bet on this, even if there might not be a market there yet, but I think there will be one. Maybe we should make some
Yeah.
features for that. Those are things that I think play a really important role in what a good DevRel can bring to a company, not just like, oh, hey, yeah, I could write blog posts and go speak at conferences, but it's like, what can you bring back to help guide the product, and help them stay ahead of that curve.
It's a very, to use a
Yeah.
fishing analogy, it's very where you cast your net. Like, where are you casting your net for the next bit of time? Because it's like, if you move around too much, you're not going to get any traction at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, I think like the last couple of years have been particularly hard for DevRel, but honestly, anybody
Mm.
probably on the go-to-market side. And I think that that's like, I do wonder about that. Like coming into, I guess I've seen two major just implosions of tech. This more recent one being there's no like 2008 is nothing compared to having a full lockdown and that whole situation where the whole world's going zany. But yeah, I guess I do recognize there's like probably an entire generation of technologists that have never seen a bust happen, or does that make sense?
No, totally. You know, it was something I talked to people about when it was happening, you know, like a year and a half ago, because I'm like, you know, it was bad. It still is kind of not fully recovered, like especially like you said in
Yeah.
DevRel and some other types of roles, like I haven't quite gotten them
Yeah.
back to where it was yet, even if the rest of the economy kind of got, but like 2008 was, I mean, I've been through some hard times and you know, having been in a long time, but 2008 was the worst job market I'd ever seen. Like it wasn't just tech; it was like it was awful. Um, and so, like you know, it just. But I think that's a long time, right? For
Yeah.
between there's people who are you know 10 years or more into their careers and had never even everything had been like just up, right? So I
Yeah.
get that it's not easy, you know, in this, and I will say like this downturn was weird because it was, you know, 2008 was like, okay, yeah, tech's terrible right now, but like the rest of the economy is pretty terrible too, right? Like, whereas like this was like, I mean, the economy took a bit of a hit, but like there not that much, and yet tech just kind of like diverged and seemed to kind of
Yeah.
be much harder hit than the rest of the economy. Um, and you're right, DevRel
Uh,
has been there's so many
yeah.
DevRels out there who like I think it's a short to me it's a little bit short-sighted for companies. I've seen it happen before. They get rid of DevRel and then they're like, oh well, we're not really, you know, we don't the top of funnel is kind of drying up and we don't seem to be connecting with developers and I don't, you know, it's like, well, you got rid of your DevRel, like, you know, your DevRel team.
But like,
That's what
This
happens.
is,
What is
yeah.
spicy take here, slightly spicy take. I think
uh-oh. It's time
uh,
for this. We get this every time. It's a spicy take from Erin. Uh-oh.
I think like that being said is like some of it like and I get it. It's awful, it's terrible. Like maybe I'm flawed because I came from only industries. I worked in journalism and then I worked in politics and agency and then I worked in tech. So like none of the career paths I've chosen in my career are known for stability. Like
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
give myself the caveat of that. Like I have been screwed up probably since my first job. Like yes and no. I feel like what 2019, 2020, it was so much DevRel was like very that influencery DevRel, and we didn't have to worry about metrics. And I almost feel like
Yeah.
to one point we may have over-indexed on metrics to a certain point instead of, and we got so obsessed with measuring something that we just forgot about doing the work. And it's like you still have to do the work. Like you have to ship something, you have to put yourself out there. Like, but I also think that DevRel kind of like they got so excited about conferences and events and yada yada that they forgot again you have to do the work, like you have to know the products, or like you have to like actually be excited about what you do. It's not just you're not just a talking billboard for the company, sorry. And I think we are seeing that if your job is going to be a talking billboard for the company, probably that's a marketing role, not necessarily a DevRel role.
Yep.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I think with like the large companies though, like there was just there was a nosedive in public markets for like tech valuations, right? And the main thing that every executive team has to do at that point is like basically just cut operational overhead and costs, aka find the most expensive expenditures in which they can cut. And if it's not something that's directly tied to the R&D line, which is usually the engineering and product side, or sales enablement and sales, they will cut that team, right? And so in some cases for large organizations, you as an individual, IC DevRel-ish type of person might be doing an excellent job in all the right ways, but they're just like, this is a cut that we can make that is one team all the way across, clean, and we will buy ourselves another 6 months of runway or whatever, or as far as the earnings call is concerned, like the balance sheet looks correct, or like sometimes it just isn't personal. Sometimes it is, unfortunately, like, you know, if the company wants to make sure that everybody else, the other like 20,000 people in that company's stock holds any value, they're doing whatever they can. They're getting rid of offices. You know what I mean? Like and it's
an
not just
easy.
like,
I don't want to say it's an easy
Yeah.
slice, but it's a slice.
well, like employee engagement and those teams always go first. You know, it's like, it's the teams that people don't really know how to measure their value properly with that go first. Cause like I've been on the marketing side or the content marketing side or the, you know, like, oh yeah, like I might end up being even when you're the last person left and they cut everybody on your team but you, it doesn't feel good because you're still making the same amount of money, but now you're doing 4 people's job, you know? So I don't know. But it also is a great time to be like, should I join a startup? Because they're going to pay me the same amount of money. And like, if no one cares, like, it's a little more creative sometimes in those early days.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I mean-
that's definitely true. Yeah.
I do remember telling my parents I got a job at like a 10-person company once, and they were like, Erin, but what about job stability? And I'm like, Mom, I got laid off from an agency. Like,
yeah,
remember when we
Yeah.
thought that was stable? Like, Mom, no careers are stable. Like, what
Yeah.
risk am I giving up here?
yeah,
I mean, I think there are stable careers in tech. I know, like having been in it a long time, it's like I've learned that lesson. You could just as easily get laid off from a big company as from a startup. In fact, I find startups sometimes have, in some ways, less risk because they're usually pretty clear about what their runway is. Like, so you say, okay, I mean, if I do a good job, we've got what, 3 years of runway based on with it, if we don't get any more funding. So I know I got at least 3 years. Where it's like, the big companies were like, hey, suddenly new layoff, boom, whole department gone, and whether I did a good job or not was like, it doesn't matter. So I think in some ways there's even a little bit of, it's unpredictable, but there's a little bit of stability in startups because you kind of know how much room you have, and you can kind of say, okay, like if you're 2 years into that 3-year runway, it's like, okay, I kind of know maybe it's time to start looking. But like I was at Adobe and we were laying people off every 6 months, and and it was really unpredictable which teams would go. So yeah.
yeah. I think I only brought up this like super bummer topic because I do see people on like the layoff list and stuff like that. And I have, like we've said, there's dev relish jobs, or there's go-to-market-ish jobs, or there's you're the onboarding-ish person, or you're the API type-ish person. And I think like I think I just want to like tell people, like, obviously the work that you've done has value. Like I see that we only invest in dev first companies. Like community in many ways is the only thing defensible for that creates defensibility for an early stage company. But I would say, in looking for a job, make it known that you are willing to do the correct things to make the company successful outside of what the talks or, just be like, I will do the things because I am dev relish and I will bring the I will bring the devs if that is core to our business, versus I don't know, holding
Personal.
fast to like very specific, like
Yeah.
You're
Like,
not going to
it's
do
not-
the job description. You're going to do the correct thing, I guess.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing and an important takeaway for everybody. It's like, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, because I know that's helped me out in the process and like finding
Yeah.
roles, because they were like, oh, you're not above writing a blog post or editing blog posts. I'm like, nope, done that, been there, done that, happy to go.
Yep.
And so-
Yep. It's I think it's, especially when you're in a startup, there's not that's not my job description kind of thing. It has to be
No, that
just do what you
yeah.
got to do to get it done. So with that being said, we are nearing the top of the hour. And we need to leave time for, so we were talking a little bit about pickles before we got on. So, well, first of all, Erin has her regular pickle fact, but Dana was apparently filling Erin in that there is some great place outside of Berlin where like you missed, Erin. Like,
I need to go back to
capital of the
Berlin
world.
purely to go back for pickling. Like, I purely need to go back. I have 3 different types of pickles in my fridge at this current moment. Actually, I have pickles and
yeah.
kimchi in my fridge right now. Like, this is my jam. Like, I have asparagus, kimchi, spicy pickles, spicy sweet pickles currently in my fridge.
Yeah,
I'm all about it.
Pickles
you
are
could
jam.
be kayaking around for a pickle in Spreewald at the beer gardens. You can buy a pickle basically in a can, and just cop the top and eat a pickle. It's like very
This is so great.
pickle. Yeah, it's the Venice of pickles.
Briny umami flavors are right up my alley.
Yeah.
This sounds like a perfect anniversary gift. You just,
I'm like, excuse me, why did we go to a baseball game when we could be in Germany eating pickles?
Yeah. So, all right, give us the pickle fact.
So this one, pickle fact, is literally out of this world. There is a Korean Food Research Institute scientist who in 2008 did an experimental thing when South Korea's first astronaut went into space. Was like, obviously we need to make a kind of kimchi specifically for this. So Kim Sung-soo said, if Korean goes to space, kimchi must go there too, and made a special strain of space kimchi that reduced the strong smell that many people are like turned off by kimchi. Maybe I like pungent food, so I'm like, I don't know, that's what I want. And a kimchi is like that pungent deliciousness. But they created the space kimchi. They killed half of the bacteria with literal radiation, and it reduced the strong smell, but also it was really important to the actual process of getting kimchi to outer space, because if a bag of kimchi starts fermenting under pressure and it bursts out of control, it'll explode all over the spaceship. So in 2008, a bunch of Korean food scientists literally made kimchi for out of this world. Cosmic kimchi. There you go. Radiation cosmic kimchi.
So I'm sitting here wondering, like, when I go to like the space museums or whatever, I can get astronaut ice cream. I can get inside, but like, why can't I get astronaut kimchi? Exactly.
Go to South Korea, I guess. That's where they did this.
Yeah.
I guess you just have to go there.
I'll go there. Their astronaut museum. Get astronaut kimchi.
Yeah, go hit it up with them. But I was very like reading about it. I was like, the fact that they like killed the smell, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. But I guess it has to do with the bacteria levels, because the bacteria is what creates the odor. But it's like that same. I do love kimchi. We had a kimchi. Yeah. We made kimchi like last week.
All right, that was actually a really good pickle fact. I like that pickle fact.
That was a good pickle fact.
Yeah. Things I learned today is kimchi is made to go to outer space. So go to your South Korean astronaut museums. If you get some astronaut kimchi, please send me some.
All right. Well, this was a really, really fun conversation. Thank you, Dana, for joining us. It was really great kind of learning from you about the VC space and DevRel. And then my dog's playing crazy. I don't know if you can hear them in the background, but so this was so much fun, and it was great to see you, Erin, as always.
Yeah.
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 So
thank you, Dana, for joining us.
Thanks, folks.
So for everybody in the audience, thank you for joining us. We will be back next month, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, provided I can stay healthy. Yes, we'll be back next month.
You've got your dose of me in the way, so this will maybe keep you out of the hospital longer. No more withdrawals.
Oh man.
So yeah. So we'll follow cfe.dev and we'll get the new episode posted there and all that. So all right. Bye.
Awesome.
Bye all.
Bye.